All right, so welcome everybody to Love Language the Round Table. Pray everybody's having a good week and that you feel encouraged and all that good stuff. So today's topic is addressing emotional trauma and Black marriages. And if you've been with us from the beginning, even in the blog talk days, we've been trying to identify the issues that exist in our family, in our community, starting with our family, starting with the Black man and the Black woman, in an attempt to not only just air out grievances, but to try to offer some solutions or advice on how to restore things. And so that's who we are. But this is one of the topics that we discuss various levels of relationships, from the beginning portion of it to the middle to even divorce. And so in the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about some potentially I ain't gonna say rough, it's probably a bad word, but interesting topics. So we just pray that you stay with us as we continue to dive in a little more deeper to really get at the root causes, plural, of the reasons why we can't seem to get together. But we're forever optimistic and hopeful that some change will be had, even just in the little work that we do to try to restore Black families. So I don't want to rant. I just want to get out. All right. So today's topic again is addressing emotional trauma in Black marriages. And the synopsis says, also, if you want to join and be on here live, there's a link in the description page if you're on Facebook, where you can click the link and then join us and have your face on here. And you can also comment as well in the live stream. We'll be back and forth trying to include your comments and questions and thoughts and whatnot as we all go along. So everybody's welcome, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it says, as we're boarding a plane, we're limited in the amount of baggage that we can take when climbing to new heights. But the same concept can be applied when entering into marriage. Whether we've accumulated emotional baggage through our upbringing or previous intimate relationships, the likelihood of entering a covenant relationship where either partner is disheartened is undoubtedly high. So what do you do when your partner projects their fears on you? How do you honor their past when it threatens to darken the present? When courting, what questions must you ask before advancing to the next stage? And which strategies are useful in saving marriages when unresolved emotional trauma leads to conversations around divorce? So those are the initial questions. And I'm not sure we ever said, but we welcome additional questions too. We put that down there just to keep the conversation flowing. But if anybody ever felt like they wanted to, throw in some other questions, we welcome that as well. So if we can just start with some opening thoughts on the subject, whoever wanted to go, and then we'll just go in that order, moving forward with each question. So I'm gonna mute myself. Not everybody jump in at once. Should I go ahead or no? I don't
know. Okay, I'm guessing. I'm guessing the double dutch is going on, and I'll just jump on in. I don't know. Yeah, I think the good thing about this topic is that we've kind of in various shades we've visited this this area numerous times, and that's a good thing, because it's obviously a topic, when you start talking about emotional baggage, this is a topic that I don't think it can ever be fully addressed. It can, it's never a point where we can say, oh, well, we're done with it. We pretty much no, this is it's like psychology. This is years and years of therapy, of having to, get through emotional trauma, in all of its manifestations, whether it's childhood emotional trauma, relationship trauma, socioeconomic trauma. All of these things affect relationships and going forward. And also not only that, but our perception of trauma, because sometimes what we think is trauma may not actually be trauma. Sometimes these are things that we manufacture in our head based on our perception of a thing. And it might not actually be that, but how we perceived it. So it's almost like we're creating trauma without there being an initial stimulus in order to, to bring that forth. So I mean, these are, not only external trauma but self-inflicted trauma can be just as bad. So that's just my opening thoughts, and I just think that every week that when we do a show, that I think it's always important to touch on these issues, because obviously when we're on Facebook and we see people's posts and comments, you realize that people are jacked up. Our people are our people are really hurt out here. And you see it. It's like you look at it, you're like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we're all jacked up. But of course, well, those of us who are in the know that at the end of the day, the Most High has a prescription for that and a cure for that. But for those who don't know that, these are things that we should, we need to talk further about, and and start to hash out instead of sweeping things under the rug like we've been traditionally taught to do. So.
Right. I guess I'll go next. Chief Zeb, you kind of laid it out real well. Trauma, um, something that can affect relationships on all different levels. I like what you said about the whole. It's interesting, actually, what you said about things that might not be traumatic, but because of the way we perceive it, it's entered that way in our minds. And of course, we go and react to that and become creatures of reaction, which is not in any sense peaceful at all. My opinion on this topic, everybody knows I like to come from. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I like to come from a standpoint that somewhat dives into the psyche a little bit. So this is not necessarily, I think is very important. Traumas and mishaps and kind of the way we perceive things, especially when it's a negative perception, tends to haunt us for long times, and until we address those issues, or not even just address it once. Sometimes it takes multiple times taking stabs at it to kind of get some peace or come to some type of resolution for it. A lot of times it doesn't have to be some type of physical abuse or anything like that. Sometimes some things are just purely mental. And we take those things and bundle it up. And when we enter into these new relationships or new connections with other people, we kind of unpack it before them too. And sometimes they don't have the energy to even deal with it. So it's interesting to see what kind of solutions and ideals the cast and those watching have to offer for those types of situations. So I'm kind of all ears on this one, and I'm gonna yield at that.
I really don't have an opening, so I'm just ready for it to begin.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a necessary thing to talk about. And I just got the definition of trauma because I hadn't looked it up. And so one definition just says a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. So just back to the comment about well, some things that they might not necessarily be traumatic. They may not necessarily be a thing or like an actual physical thing. That's interesting as well. I do think that that we all are having impacted negatively by other people or situations, and so I think that the like owning that and acknowledging that is very liberating. I think that for generations, us as a people, both men and women, have held stuff inside. Our brothers feel like they can't express themselves for being fear of looking at it as being a punk or a weak or a sissy. And then vice versa, with women, we've been expected to be emotional, but not too emotional, because then it becomes like aggressive. So there's definitely something wrong with us as a people, period. And I think that the more we tell the truth, the more we'll get to the healing. But if we don't talk about it, and not that we talk about it to point the finger at anybody, because pointing the finger and don't do nothing but help the person, but have the person relive grievances, or the person that inflicted the wound to relive it. So it's not, I wouldn't, I'm not a proponent of necessarily rehashing it over and over again, especially if there's no point to it. Like I think you should talk about it, but not if there ain't no agreement. Then it's some stuff is left to the Most High to really to resolve. So I think that in this conversation, I hope that those listening too get that we're not trying to fix nobody or save nobody or none of that, but it's just a safe place for everybody to be able to talk about these issues, and that the work will be on all of us individually outside of anybody else to open ourselves up for the healing, whether or not you're a praying person or you follow Torah or not. I agree with Zebulon. Like, there is a solution. We can see the way we should deal with each other in the scriptures. So that's what I'm on. Like, that's how I want to resolve stuff. But everybody may not necessarily be willing to do that, especially if you don't even believe in a higher power. But I do think, again, that if we talk about it, then it at least allows something to happen to be restored, or like Shema has said a long time ago, it's for us to work towards perfection. So the first question is, hold on a second. I just had it. Here we go. All right. The first question is, okay, what do you do when your partner projects their fears on you? So now we're shifting into, if you're married, and how do we deal with some of these issues? So y'all married, and you didn't know, or maybe you did know, but now you're getting to see some of the emotional trauma that has been that have darkened your partner's childhood. So what would you do once those things start to surface? How would you address them?
Well, not to sound like a broken record or whatever, but courtship. It's like, I mean, maybe we should change the name of the show to Court TV, because ultimately that's the root of so much of these issues that we discuss. Because I think a lot of the the trauma that we suffer internally, and that we end up hoisting upon the backs of our partners, a lot of it has to do with, a lot of that is because these things weren't revealed from the very beginning. So people come into these relationships sometimes very naive, very, thinking that, oh, all is well. Why? Because, we weren't trying, I wasn't looking at, or you weren't looking at the real issues. I'm busy checking your body out. You're busy checking out mine, and whatever the case. We're caught up in all of the, the real fancy and colorful and beautiful aspects of relationships. And so by the time we decide, in our own self-deception, that we're going to come together and be together, now all of a sudden all of this stuff begins to unpack. And so now it's going to be frustrating, because because we were blindsided by it. We didn't see it coming. So I think that in the courting process, and even if it's not courting, even if it's just simply like a purely platonic friendship, you need time to allow people to unpack. And not only unpack, but we as individuals, we have to be able to see the movements of the person, to see why certain things trigger them. Why is this person so untrusting? Everything is, I can't trust people. Like, okay, but why? Now, because people are just, and you hear, we've heard this, people are just, they're very untrustworthy, and you can't, and then after a while you're like, well, I don't know. I haven't been around enough people to make that assessment. I've only been around people from Brooklyn, so I can't make a worldwide, a claim on people. But eventually you begin to see that, well, wait a minute, there's a reason why this person doesn't trust. And some of it may not even be external. They may have lack of trust in self. Maybe they you know what I'm saying, they possibly lack, you know what I'm saying, they feel that maybe they lack the tools in order to determine if this person is trustworthy. You hear a lot of females who, you know, they'll say, well, you know, again, I call it the Halle Berry syndrome. You have a lot of females that'll say, oh, I done been, you know, this guy and that guy, you know, men are this and this and that, and you know, and you realize that all of these relationships that they've been in, they've all been on some level abusive or whatever. After a while, the focus can't be to those men anymore. Now it's like, well, wait a minute. Why are you attracting this? 15, 20, 25 years, and you're attracting the same type of men. Now, yes, okay, yeah, he might be a piece of crap. Granted, no doubt. But you're attracting them. So this now turns the focus internally and say, okay, what is it about you that piece of crap dudes seem to say, yeah, she's it. I gotta have her. What is it about you that is attracting untrustworthy type people? And women, and it could be the same for men as well, but women will look at that and they'll start second guessing themselves and say, well, maybe I'm the problem. I gotta be the problem. Which reinforces the non-trusting nature that they have. They don't trust because their tools for determining if a person is trustworthy is compromised. And it's compromised because they've chosen untrustworthy people. And they've chosen untrustworthy people because it just goes in circles over and over, and you can never get out of it. So now when you get into these relationships where you might be with a person who's very trustworthy, it's impossible now, almost impossible for that person to look at them objectively and say, you know what, he's different. Because you've already convinced yourself that no, he can't be different. He's just like everybody else. I can't trust him. So there's so much stuff that ends up getting unpacked in these relationships. And how do you deal with it? You know what I'm saying? How does a partner, deal with it? And that's why I say from the very beginning, the last thing that should be on the mind of any prospective couple, whatever, the last thing that should be on your mind is physical, carnality, any of those things. This is, I think Tamar says it a lot. This is this is the what did you call it? Not the interview.
The customer service representative.
The customer
right.
service representative. This is what we're looking at. And so when we look at the these questions, because I'm looking at all of them, and these are, what do you do when your partner projects their fears on you? I think that was the first question. What do you do when your partner projects their fears on you? One of the first things that you have to do, at least from my perspective, is you gotta consider the possibility that their fears might actually be well-founded. I think a lot of times when we hear people complaining about things, the first thing we think is, oh, well, they probably, yeah. And it's like, no, you got to look at it and say, yeah, well, why do they have these fears? What is it about that, what they've been through in their life that is still riding with them in their adulthood? 20, 30 years removed from the trauma, why is it still there? And do I have the patience and the technical know-how to help that person, to help them in that situation, if I even in fact want to do that? Because I think we've always hear people say that it's not the responsibility of the man to heal the woman, or it's not the responsibility of the woman to heal the man. Then my question is, excuse the expression, but then what the hell are we doing? Why are we together? Like, if we're not going to build each other up, if we're not going to say, you know what, I see the potential in her and she sees the potential in me. Okay, yes, there's some things that need to be tweaked. And then he has some issues, whatever, I have some issues, but how can we build each other up to be the type of spouses that we mutually need? If we're not trying to figure that out during the courtship process, then what are we getting in these relationships for? Oh, we want to have sex. Okay, then that solves it. That's what it's about. But if you know what I'm saying, but if it's about, but you know what I'm saying, but if we're being mature about it, then it's like, no, everybody had, like you said, Taylor, everybody has trauma. All of us. So it's not like you're gonna find someone that doesn't have trauma. You might find someone who's done a better job at masking it. But we all have trauma. So it's not an issue of whether or not you're gonna find, no, you're gonna find somebody with trauma. The question that you have to ask yourself, is this person's potential indicative of him being worthy of helping him to build himself up out of that trauma, and vice versa? Is she worthy of me taking the time out of my life to help build her up and to take her out of the wickedness that has been infused in her soul? Can I get her out of that and bring her where she needs to be with me, and vice versa? So the first thing, again, not well, we're all along with it, but we have to, the first thing we that we have to do is we have to consider the possibility that these that the person's fear is well founded and that it's legitimate, instead of just saying, oh, here they go, they got issues. Like, well, we all have issues. Is it, do I have the technical know-how and the patience to deal with it and to help them work at it, and vice versa?
Oh man, how do you follow that up? Um, you unpacked it really well. I think that was excellent. It's not much that I can add. I would actually, just compound off of what you said as far as recognizing if you have the patience, energy, and time to kind of delve into those things and work with the person. I definitely think this is a matter that is expressed more so in the courting phase. Sometimes you don't find out how deep it is until later down the line. Or, like you said, some people are good at managing, and other times some people are just good at hiding how deeply something impacts them, or they brush it off, or they won't kind of deal with their emotions, leaving you in the position that things are better than what they are. So we talk about honesty a lot on this show. So I would just add, hopefully both entities are being honest in their feelings about the situation or about trauma in general. Because based off the definition that Tamar read, it's more so an internal thing than an external one, or more so something might be considered small to me, but impact you completely different. And we have to recognize that that impact, how it affects both parties, and being able to say, or being comfortable with saying, this is not something I can help with, or this is an avenue I think you should go as far as professional help or something like that. Although that's something that plagues our community as well as not seeking. So keeping it really short, I think those things are important. The question was kind of so much as, what do you do when these things are kind of laid at your feet? I say, offer that initial help that you can. And if you see it as something that you can't, then be upfront with that. Express that as early as possible, because that allows that person to either explore other options, or you guys can explore other options together. Not saying it's something where you have to end your relationship, but it might be something where you might have to go seek counsel from a higher authority or a person who has more knowledge. So understanding those things or having foresight to kind of see what you're trying to get into is important. And I'm just going to yield at that. I don't want to ramble or start rehashing things already spoken.
Can you say the question one more time, please?
Uh, What do you do when your partner projects their fears on you?
Well, I agree with what they said. The fear should be put out there in the courting phase. And I mean, I'm talking about extensively. Shouldn't be part way put out there, in my opinion. You know, I'm nobody though. And then if it's a new fear over the course of the relationship, I think one of the first things um, both of you should do is go into prayer with the Most High before you even handle it, because certain people react and or act uh, differently than others when expressing their fear. Some people could be defensive, and if you're not someone that can um, kind of stay balanced when receiving that type of act or reaction from the expression of their fear, then it can go downhill. So I just think it's a few steps. I think the prayer is big. I think you individually helping yourself to be ready for that possibly, you know, is key. And I think it should go smoothly if those things are. When I say smoothly, I mean more so like it'll be progression if a lot of those things are implemented. But the very first thing we always keep saying is courtship. That's it.
Yeah,
Oh no,
oh,
and I just want to just inject something real quick too, like because we kind of I know we covered it before in other shows as well, but that's the beautiful thing about it, and that is that sometimes the best way to get a person to unpack their their trauma and whatever in the courting phase is to actually create arguments. And I don't mean petty arguments, like whatever, but like because people have a tendency of hiding their trauma very well, and the only time you can see where a person is, where a person stands on issues, is to sometimes you may have to drag it out of them, and the best way to get it out of a person is to get them emotionally riled up. One of the best things that I've experienced in my, like, just not only relationships but in friendships, is you get to learn incredible amounts, you receive an incredible amount of insights to people when you argue with them, when their emotions are heightened, and and the the fence that they've built around their self is no longer there. Now they're out and they're letting themselves pour out, and you're like, oh, okay. Like I think the old saying that that the best way to get truth out of people, the three things that gets truth out of people is liquor, money, and anger. This is where you get to see people for what they actually are, and not in that protected customer service type of person that they are. That these are the things that brings the person really to the forefront, and you really get to see what they're really about, and all of their feelings about a situation comes out. So I'm not saying go in and and just be like, hey, you're ugly, and whatever, and cause them to whatever. But in the process of having discourse, pose challenging questions at each other, to make them come out of their comfort bag. Because a lot of again, a lot of times what we're presenting is what's on the resume. We're in a, what I'm saying, we're in a job interview, and we're only giving that person what they can see on the resume, the best possible situation, whatever like that. But it's only through probing and questioning that you begin to see what a person is, and you'll cause them to unpack themselves just from probing questions. So I just want to just put that out there. I don't want it to make it just seem like, like Shamal was saying, just, going through the process and the courting of getting to know, understand. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you get to know them, but if this person is a master at concealing their hurt self, you'll never get to the bottom of who they are until you're living with them, until you're living together. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait a minute, when you can actually just start plucking these things out during the courting phase by making them go to a heightened sense of interaction, and then you can kind of say, oh, look at that. Oh, no, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? Get them to spill themselves, get them to show you their soul. You know, it it works wonders down the line when you've already invested time, you know, time in that relationship. So that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, all good points. I would offer this as well, because we're talking about in the context of marriage. So so definitely this is all good when you're courting. But if you're in a marriage, let's say you've been married to somebody for 5 years, right? And because courting is a I ain't gonna say fairly new, but a kind of unusual construct for a lot of people, especially Black people, right? A lot of us don't court or whatever. So just in having a fair balance, especially considering who else might see the video. If you already married somebody, and now all this stuff is coming out, like what will we say to those people? And so my little bit of whatever, I don't know anything, but it says, what do you do when your partner projects their fears in you? The idea is, you're in it already, and you're realizing that some stuff are triggers. You're not gonna, and I'm probably the only person that feels this way on this panel, but I don't think that people show you themselves, even if you quit somebody for some years. I think people still hold stuff inside. So it's ideally they would be matching you, but some people don't match. You know what I'm saying? And they only do things to get to a certain point or to achieve a certain goal. Even a structural, like, a woman might do stuff just so she can say, oh, I'm married now. Or a man might say that, oh, I'm just, I finally got a wife now. Now, especially you think about the Hebrew community where marriage is a coveted thing. We want to be married and settled down and seen as, respected by our wife, or respected, or part of our husband's household. All this stuff is like pie in the sky stuff. But I think that we don't, just to everybody's point, we don't really have a chance to sit and not only reveal ourselves properly, but we still have to work through it. The same way with the example I said about walking down the street, getting hitting the head with a basketball, and now I'm on the ground. I think it was a football. It was a football at that time. Walking down the street, get hit in the head, bow, with a football. I fall on the ground, now my elbow's scraped. You come along, the kids in the street, by the way, the bad kids in the street come along and say, hey, man, I'm so sorry, right? So now that scar gotta heal. You know what I'm saying? And that's a process. If I broke my knee and it didn't set right, now I have to go back and get it. I think I had to go back and have surgery to have it set right. So that's what trauma is. Trauma is not, I'm sorry, or trauma is not a person saying, this is what some of my fears or what triggers me. You know what I'm saying? It is understanding the full process of it. That it's not, nobody can save your husband, your wife can't save you. Nobody can save you, especially if it was stuff that happened before they even met you. And it's not even fair that they would even fix that. They may be, like, if you have a health condition, right? They may be the vitamins you take after you have full-blown cancer or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't cause the initial flare up, but they can help you towards the restitution and restoration that you need. But they alone, but you also got to do your work. You have to, perhaps, I'm just saying, I don't hope somebody takes this wrong with cancer. I don't want to play around with that. I'm just giving an extreme example of an illness. But it includes you doing the work on your own. So that's the partnership. The partnership is both sides doing what they can. Like you said, Zebulon, we should be trying to help each other out, but it's not one person's responsibility to help the other person. It is a mutual partnership that's going to go through ebbs and flows, and you're going to say something stupid, and it's going to throw it off, and you're going to say something stupid, it's going to throw him off, but why are we here? And I think that's the point. And so, and I don't want to ramble, but back to the original question that says that what do you do when these things come up? This person has not fully, they might just now be voicing it. Maybe they took a long time to speak it out loud, right? So they're projecting their fears on you. And I would say to listen. And I believe that what's missing in our community is empathy and compassion and the ability to shut up and stop taking stuff personally. Sometimes it's not about you personally, but let that person, whoever it is, male or female, express themselves without you having to come through with the answer. Sometimes you don't want you to come through the answer. They just want somebody they can talk to. You'll be amazed at how many people come and call me about their life and just want to talk. You know what I'm saying? That's healing in and of itself. The safe space without judgment. So I think that's that's something that we can do right now. That you don't need a psychology degree to do that. You can do that right now. You can offer your ear to somebody who's in need, whether it's in your house or not. And I think then we can start talking about and then so again, if your spouse is projecting their fears on you and it's becoming toxic, then yeah, now we can move forward and you can, in your authority, male or female, say, hey, that's not me. I love you. And I think that the partner that's been attacked can just respond with more love. And that's a higher thinking. It's not always, like you said, Zebulon, it's not, we get defensive because we like, wait, what did I do? But that takes maturity. Everybody that gets married should not be getting married. It's a maturity level. It's a selfless thing. It's a you before me. It's a us before anything. And I think until we get that together, no matter what we say on these shows, it don't make a difference because we can't come to none of these. We can't fix us until we, learn to stop being so selfish, right? This everything everybody we come into contact with, whether you decide to get married or not, we're part of a bigger community. You don't even live in a house probably by yourself. You got a neighbor next door to you or the car running, driving past on the street. So we're a community whether we like it or not. And I think a lot of our problems is because we're selfish and we don't know how to not be so protective of ourselves. And so I don't know. That's my initial thoughts on it. And so the next question is, how do you honor their past when it threatens to darken the present? So again, your spouse, he or she going off on you, you know what I'm saying? You're just like the other dudes, you know what I'm saying? And so how do you honor their past? So now it's to a part where an intervention needs to be made. So how would you all, what solutions would you suggest in that scenario where it's about to mess up the current relationship?
That's always that's a very difficult, very, very difficult slippery slope situation. Because trying to honor someone's past, which obviously if it's coming up, it's obviously not past anymore. It's quite the present. And how do you honor it without it actually destroying the relationship? And I think the easiest answer to that is you may not be able to. I listen. People say, I know people say that us on this show that we're very idealistic and we seek the highest moral ethos or whatever that we're dealing with. But and that is true. But on a more in a more practical sense, one of the things that we have to be prepared to admit is that person, there might not be anything that you can do for that person. That trauma might be everlasting. We like to believe that everything can be fixed, and by all means, try your best to do whatever you can to to fix things. But there's just some trauma that I believe that may not be able to be fixed. It might be like herpes. The only thing you can do is keep it under control. And not to sound graphic, whatever, but it's like that. It's not like some some trauma. It's a matter of getting a shot. You get a shot. Oh, okay. It takes some time, and you'll and you get over it. Some things are like herpes that it won't kill you, but it'll always be an issue. The best that you can do is keep it under control. When it's about to get have a little outburst or whatever the case, that's the best that you can do. But it's not going anywhere. It's called luggage for a reason. Or what do you call it? What they used to call it? Not luggage. They used to call it I forgot the term that they used back in the 80s for that. I'm saying for herpes that like it was just something. Maybe it was luggage. I can't baggage or whatever it was. But it's just saying that you'll always have it. And the only thing that you can do is to keep it under control. but it never goes anywhere. And I think that there's some elements of certain traumatic experiences that people go through that you, as the other partner, may have to come to the come to the acceptance that, hey, it ain't going anywhere. There's absolutely nothing that I can do to alleviate this issue from her or him. There's nothing I can do. It's completely out of my realm. So the only thing that now you can do is try to figure out how to deal with it, how to keep it under, under a manageable control level where it can be managed. It may not be, go anywhere, but it can be managed. That's the only thing that that we of course can do. So we have to accept the fact that some traumatic issues is just outside of the realm of our influence. That there's really nothing that we can do. But the only thing that we can do is try to determine if, how do we live with it? How do we, what type of space can I give this person in order for them to deal with it, in their own space? Like you say, Tamar, sometimes it's just an issue of, and letting them have that space to kind of deal with it or whatever like that. And how do we allow them to deal with it and still maintain our sanity, and not feel like it's personal? And like you said, you have to understand that it really isn't personal. The fears that they're throwing on you, it actually has nothing to do with you. You're just the soundboard. The real issue is all of the skeletons that preceded you. You're a flesh and blood sentient being. She's not addressing, or he's not addressing the sentient being. They're addressing the skeletons. And so you have to be able to, and this is, it's difficult. So I mean, I'm not saying this as if it's something that that can easily be dealt with, and we can just be like, oh yeah, that's the answer and move on. It's like, no, this is what they call life work. And you have to be able, and you have to determine if this is something that you can spend the rest of your life dealing with, because this is going to be a lifelong issue. That's kind of like what marriage is supposed to be. So so I've heard. These are things that have to be, is it something that I can spend the rest of my life working with her on? And that also illustrates the level of love and commitment that you have in that relationship. And again, I'm not saying that all these situations are dealable. I mean, some situations you may have to back out of it and say, you know what, I don't know if I can do this. And there's situations that you just like for instance, and I'll just give a brief example. Let's say your wife, and I'll put this on the woman for now because it doesn't happen as much with men as it does with women. Let's say that the trauma that the woman has gone through is she was molested profusely in her childhood, then got older and was raped multiple times. Now, part of her wants a viable, sustainable relationship. But the reality of her being is saying, who's to say that this guy won't do the very same things to me? And she has a very legitimate vantage point at this point. What can you say to that? You can't. It's not an issue of just telling her, no, all men are not like that. Yeah, that sounds good, but her trauma is not even going to allow her to consider the possibility that you may not be one of them. And those type of situations, and I hate to say it this way, because some, I know there's people out there who are not proponents of divorce and all that stuff, but those type of situations, you may have to conclude that there's nothing I can do for her, nothing. And I'm not saying divorce, but I'm just saying that that one of the hardest things that a spouse can admit to him or herself is that I can do absolutely nothing to help her or him. there's nothing in my power to do it. So that's why I say it's very slippery. It's and I don't even know if I have a conclusive, response to that, other than it's hard, So I'll shut my mouth for now.
Being that I'm up next, tricky question. The whole
Tamar, I tell you, Tamar, and these questions, boys, you busting us in the head with them.
The whole honoring the past thing. I hear a few situations, and it's something not necessarily to go against, but it's just another vantage point. We say a lot of times we can't heal or save, and that's true. But when it comes to honoring that past, I think it would be better to acknowledge it first. And a lot of times with trauma, it's because things have gone unacknowledged, whether it was the person experiencing or those that they've tried to talk to, or even if they haven't tried to talk to, there were signs. And acknowledging those signs can be big as far as the helping or the spearheading the process of overcoming. So whatever that situation is, it's interesting that we talk about molestation. A partner years ago, probably my early stages of high school, was sexually assaulted. A lot of people don't. Okay, I think I can speak on this platform about it. And her unpacking that kind of happened throughout our relationship. Now we broke up on different circumstances, but I remember we had a situation which was like light intimacy, and she began to cry, like tears, and I'm like, but we talked and she explained, and I think that was kind of one of the first times that she was able to kind of kind of able to dive in and just have an ear. If I remember correct, she told me she didn't really have people that she can talk to about the situation. And I kind of was like, well, neither one of us is ready for any of this that we were quote unquote prepared to do. So we kind of stepped back from it. But I, at the time, resources that I had, I tried to give to her to kind of help her navigate along that way. So yeah, that can be rough. But I think if my understanding of honoring the past, I think that can be done. I think the ideal is the way that you do it. Like you said, just kind of brushing stuff off, like hey, here she goes arguing, or here he goes complaining again. Not looking at it from your vantage point, but from theirs, or stepping in their shoes, as they say, or allowing them to have that voice. And as Tamar said, not being a term that a friend of mine likes to use, butthurt, and taking everything within yourself and saying this is about you, but recognizing when it could be, because whatever triggered that emotion could have very well been something that you did, and acknowledging that and being able to apologize and kind of work through that, and being a tempest for that working through it part, because sometimes it's okay, I triggered this emotion and I don't know how to turn it off, and that's hard, especially coming from a standpoint where you want to be that person that they come to, or you want to be that safe haven. Sometimes you can't be that safe space, or you can't provide it. So whereas in stepping back might be an option, but also another option would be finding that safe space, or helping them come to a find of that safe space, even if it's talking to someone else, or you decreasing your role so somebody else could increase. Um, and that being the solution that helps them if they feel comfortable. Because the thing about a safe space is the ability to be comforted and to feel comfortable. I'm sorry, and to feel comfortable speaking about it, or whatever it is, or saying you triggered me this way. Finding out what that is and being able to say, okay, this is how I would handle that differently. For instance, if a person was in a verbal abusive situation and you begin to yell in the course of an argument, a dialogue, or something like that, a discussion that was mentioned in the comments, um, and you begin to start talking loud, you cannot, it doesn't have to be that you're saying things disrespectful or that you're right or wrong about a situation, but the manner in which you talk to that person triggered something which brought an onslaught of other things from the past. So sometimes you have to say, okay, I have to decrease my nature in doing this to increase or create a more positive solution. And that's something that we can kind of look at more so. Shoot, man, I'm kind of talking to myself in this manner too. You know what I mean? I'm quite sure we all do. But just being and realizing that sometimes things can be handled differently. And I think that's a good start to kind of honor what they're going through, deal with it, and kind of deciding your place in that. Because you don't have to be that one to fix it. You can be a part of a team that fixes it, or a team that helps that other person fix it within themselves, or giving them the space to kind of handle it. There's different options, and it depends on the severity of the trauma and depends on the severity of the situation. And it also depends on your part in the situation. Because sometimes we do things in relationships and it's like, well, damn, I messed up. And me being the one that messed up can't in the same space be the same one to say this is how we're going to fix it, because they're not over the you messed up part. And you got to allow that. And something I'm actually, learning and kind of dealing with now is allowing how do you provide that, So I would say look at the situation, treat each past, present, current situation as it stands, and kind of speak out and be open about how you're willing to help, support, fall back from it. So whichever portion you're going to do or whichever role you're going to do, even if it's saying, hey, you might need to go talk to such and so and so, or hey, I might need to remove myself for a while for that time being, because if you're married, I'm one that doesn't necessarily believe in divorce unless extreme circumstances. And because of that, even if it's a separation for a time or two, or if it's a, hey, somebody else can provide more insight, then go to it. Sometimes we have to go outside of our comfort zones to find levels of success. And sometimes our comfort zone is hiding that trauma. And sometimes we have to go outside of that in order to find or embrace a solution. So I'm not going to try to be a little short-winded and just yield it there.
I got to know to hear the question again. I don't have the thing in front of me, so I don't know what the question is.
The question is, how do you honor their past when it threatens to darken the present if you're married?
I mean, the first and foremost thing, you just got to listen more than anything. 'Cause sometimes, even if you give your thoughts on something, it might not be received. So, if anything, just be an open ear. And that's the best way you can honor it. Because like Zebulon said, sometimes you'll play no effect in helping the situation get better. I mean, you could say something or just, I don't know, just listen more than anything. That's all I got.
Yeah, I want to read some of the comments. I know it's a lot of conversation. Thank you to everybody that's joining us live on Facebook. It's a lot of like people respond to each other. So what's I gonna do? Where I just seen it? Oh, so Noya Kala, hey girl. She said, first, if a person has told you what has hurt them in their past, please don't be the one to hurt them in the same ways. And then she said, okay. And then she said, it all goes back to loving the person you are with and trying to work with them. And she said, if you can't acknowledge your part where things get triggered, you can't help move past and heal. And then Shamika, hey girl, she said, it's very important to know the person you are dealing with, because what people don't understand is you can control your triggers. Oh, I got you. Okay. Yeah. So you say you can or you can't? I think you're right. I think it says you can. I think I'm reading you right. Excuse me. Is that you can control your triggers? I think again, we welcome everybody's thoughts, and we don't claim to have the solution. We're just trying to work through all this stuff together. So any additional suggestions, if anybody want to jump on and add their thoughts, you're more than welcome to do so on the panel. So just what everybody said. Just I think basically, of course, listening, honoring somebody is listening. And then, of course, with extreme examples like abuse, that's always a touchy subject. And, I know Black people don't like this, so I might get stoned for saying this, but there's nothing wrong with therapy. Like, I believe in therapy. I went to therapy before. And I didn't continue, and I feel like we all should have one in our back pockets. And, of course, I wouldn't tell anybody what to do, but even if it's somebody that, that's in your family, or it's not your family, maybe somebody in another way, to be able to talk to them about some of these things. We need that, whether it be your spouse or not. So, but back to the question. But as far as the one spouse honoring the fears and emotional trauma of the other person, definitely at least being in the front line. So I would say if you are married and you feel like you can't talk to your spouse about these things, that's bad, because they should be your first line of defense. But if that can't happen, right, because that's a whole, and then that goes back to the initial comment about the lack of trust. Because if you can't bear your soul, I mean, if you get in the bed and sleep with somebody and you do all kind of freaky stuff in the bed, but you can't say, hey, these things happen to me, something is wrong. And I think that we could, as people, whether you're husband or wife, the best thing we could do is to at least offer our spouse the opportunity to vent, you know what I'm saying, and talk about it. And again, not offer solutions. And I think too, to speak gently to one another. Like, you think about how we deal with our kids. And I think, and this is something that I've known for a while, but I don't know, Father help me. But I know when my kids, when they do stuff, I don't immediately be like, but for some reason with adults, if I've said this bothers me over and over again and they do it, like I have a hard time having family compassion, you know what I'm saying? But with my kids, when they do something, I'm a lot easier. It's easy for me to be like, well, he don't understand. And maybe he didn't mean it that way. It's a lot more, but I think that empathy and compassion has to be done more often in our relationships. Not that you excuse people's behavior when, if something happens, we should be calling each other out, or addressing the issue in a respectful way, but bringing it up. But the compassion and the empathy, like, we are failing at that. And so that all that does is reinforce and recycle the trauma. If we feel like as adults we can't even talk to one another and bare our souls, and like you said, Zebulon, like, what's the point? You know what I'm saying? We can all just be brothers and sisters, and that's still good, because that's family. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next question, and we kind of already talked about this, so this might be kind of going backwards. Yeah. Noya, if you want to jump on, there's a link. If you go to the page Love Language Roundtable to the event link, there's a link, a Zoom link that you can click if you wanted to get on. We would love to see your face. I miss you. But can somebody put that link in the chat so anybody can join too? So the next question is, when courting, what questions must you ask before advancing to the next stage? This is kind of us going backwards. We kind of already talked about some of these things, but if you've been married before, what would you tell somebody at the earlier parts of a relationship that you wish somebody would have told you before you got married concerning emotional trauma and all of that? So hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, that's a hell of a question. Yeah, I mean, because they say hindsight is 20/20. So of course, it's always easy to look back and say, hey, it's like, yeah, but I think one of the things that maybe not so much asked, and maybe not so much a question to ask, but a concept that both parties has to go into the courting process, or and ultimately marriage, concepts that we have to go into acknowledging up front, and that is, we must be able to separate our grafted ideas of marriage versus the reality of marriage. I think a lot of the things that we've been taught about marriage from our youth up is it doesn't prepare us for the realities of it. When you think about American marriage, and not just the marriage, but the marriage ceremony, for instance. One of the things that you hear is, they give you these concepts of, I forgot what is the actual, do you agree or whatever.
Talking about that, the
yeah,
marriage
that
vow, to have it to hold for rich and poor.
Yeah, to love, to
Right.
love, cherish, obey. No, just but yeah. But those things that and they tell you, from richer to poorer, till death do us part. One of the things that it does not, that process does not consider is, our relation. Are the conditions of the relationship, are they suitable for a till death do us part situation? I don't know if I'm presenting it clearly, but the way that relationships are lined up for us, in this society, when we are standing there in front of the in front of the reverend or pastor, whatever he is, and he's saying, do you agree to this marriage that it is going to be forever, it's going to be till death do us, death do you part, and all of this flowery stuff. And it's not, listen, it sounds great, you're in your beautiful white dress, and I'm looking sharp, how Martin says, I'm looking fine or whatever, everything is looking beautiful. But once that's over and now you're in the house, the question now is, wait a minute, what have I done to convince myself that this is the type of relationship that I can spend the next 50, 60, 70 years in? And oftentimes we don't do the due diligence in trying to figure out, will this in fact be forever? What's happening?
No, somebody joined. I was trying to mute her mic. Hey, Shamika, if you can mute yourself on your end, so there's no background. I apologize, Evelyn.
No. I just saw
Okay.
I just saw her window pop up, so I didn't know.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't know what you were looking at. I was like, what's happening?
No, I got you. Okay, go ahead. My bad.
No problem. So yeah, there's a lot of things that that we can look back and and say the questions that we should ask before advancing to the next stage in the relationship. But I think one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, have I done the due diligence in determining if this relationship is in fact eternal material. Because they say, forever is a long time. Forever is a long time, and 60 years is a very long time. In human years, that's a long time. And what have you done to to not only convince yourself, but to convince the other person that this relationship is in fact going to be worth the 60 years that we're going to put in? Because after that 60 years is in, and if that wasn't a very good 60 years, lo and behold, this is not like Mario Brothers. You cannot get a do-over. There is no, oh, okay, I messed that up. Okay, let me just go get these free men and go back in and do the whole board over again. No, it's a wrap. You're now 80 years old, and you're trying to ask yourself, what was I thinking? But that was the point. We weren't thinking. We were moving emotionally. We were moving carnally, and so there's like I said, we could probably go down a whole bunch of list of questions, but I think again, all those questions, they boil down to, have we done our due diligence in determining if the relationship, if this movement that we're called courting, is it going to, do I see the evidence that it'll bear the fruits necessary for us to invest half a century in it? Or if not, what can I do to amicably bring this courting to a close and not waste both of our time? Because we always talked about time on this show and how it is one of those commodities that cannot be recouped once it's gone. So that's so I'm giving very general a general framework, and I'm sure everybody else will be able to bring in some more detailed observations. So plus we got we got Shamika, Sister Shamika, and Sister, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing, Noya, Sister Noya. Okay, I'm sure they got some things to bring to the table. So I'll shut my mouth.
Should I yield and let the two new entries express themselves, or should I?
Yeah, let's give them the floor and see what they say first. So Noya, what's up, girl? And Shamika, the either one you want to talk now? Or do you want to wait until Isaiah's done talking? Really, it's up to you. You have the floor if you want to jump in.
Well,
Hey, girl.
How are you? You're pretty
Good.
face.
Happy Sabbath. Oh, you too. You too. Good to see you.
I gotta address what Chief Zeb said. Shabbat shalom to everyone. About the argument thing. Everybody doesn't argue. He said it earlier. He said, if you want to know what people's issues are, pick an argument. And I went like, whoa, I'm not gonna argue. I'll shut down. And that doesn't work for everybody. Now, as I was saying in conversation with Isaiah, that it's cool to have the hard discussions. Me personally, and something else you said too, I want to address that too. You were talking about we need to stop being so selfish. We are very subjective people. We are our favorite subject. And when things go wrong, we look at, well, I didn't do it. No, maybe you didn't do it. But in this moment, I may need you to listen. I may need you to understand. I may need you to exhibit some empathy. Back to the argument thing. That don't work for everybody. That may work for you. But with your partner, it has to be the becoming of we. And you have to find the dynamic of what we and us, not I or you. As I was saying to Isaiah too, that arguments are polarizing because two people are on different sides. If we're together, it's about being together, even though we may have a disagreement. And so we have to get to the place of seeing what's right, not who's right. Because personally, I want to be happy. I would rather be happy than to have to be right all the time. And see, that pulls you out of a subjective place to where I didn't do it. Now, he addressed the thing about being molested and raped. That's part of my story. And he was talking about where a woman might want to get into a relationship, but she's going to never consider that that person may not do it. Yeah, we'll consider that you may not do it, but we are always looking for the other shoe to drop. And so therefore, that being a part of, let me speak for me, my story, reassurance is necessary. After a while, a brother gonna get tired of saying, well, I love you, I'm here for you, I'm not gonna violate you. But for a woman like me, that's something I need. And so I, me being me, I bring all my truths to the table. I do not sit there and send forth my representative. I'm good with telling you the truth, and I put it all on the table, and I let you look at it and decide if that's what you want to do. If that's not what you want to do, then bye, holla, we can be friends. It's nice meeting you. You want to share some scripture every every now and then, wave when you see me. But if you don't fit my dynamic, then we need to get that stuff out the way. I'm done with that whole sending forth my representative. And that, but you're right, you never really put it all out there, especially when you've been traumatized, because you understand the dynamic that you can be violated when you're vulnerable. And a person who has been triggered and violated, the last thing they want is the person that they let down their guard with to be violated again in that same way. And maybe you'll say, well, I ain't him, but you're doing what he's doing. So you looking like he looking, you moving like he moving. And so what am I supposed to think? How are we supposed to maneuver with that? It comes to making choices. As Sister Shamika said, we're not in control of those triggers. You pull the trigger, the bullet coming out. I'm the trigger, or that thing is the trigger. You pop it, somebody's gonna get hurt. And so we need to understand those things. As we get older, as we take the blinders off of ourselves regarding ourselves, and really take a moment to look at what our real traumas are and the effects of them. People are scared to say I'm messed up, if that makes sense. They're scared to say, hey, I'm messed up. I got junk. Because we want to walk around like we're perfect, and we're not perfect. That's be the first thing. I told this one dude this I'm in relationship with right now. I told him all my junk. I'm 53. I can't have no babies. I have fibromyalgia, so some days I can't think. Some days I hurt. I got issues. I got arthritis in both my knees. I got kids. I have a minor child I'm still raising, and he's impetuous and teenage angst. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to engage here? And, we need to stop saying, oh, it's all good, it's perfect. We need to be honest with self, and that's where it starts. Because if you don't deal with yourself, you really won't fully know what your triggers are, and you'll be going off on everybody for little or nothing. And you really can't, I don't know why I did that. I hate those kind of people. Yes, I said hate. Okay, I'm done. I'm shutting up.
No, that's love. I that was good. That's good words.
Real quick, just for clarity purposes, because I know earlier when I mentioned the thing about arguments, about whatever. Let me clarify that. When I say arguments, I don't necessarily mean it in the social media manner of just, well, we're just gonna be going back and forth and all day or whatever the case may be. But in the sense of, like I said, invoking or or provoking like emotions, where we're going to like certain questions or whatever like that, and make a person speak out of their comfort zone. Because when we're speaking in our comfort zone, we'll put up that fence, and every response that we have will be cookie cutter. Everything will sound very good, and I'll be telling you exactly what you want to hear. Or you, like you said, listen, don't give me the nice response. Give me exactly what you really feel about a situation. And sometimes you can't get that when, you know, when the playing field is calm. Sometimes you may have to ruffle something a little bit to say, hey, listen, talk to me. Tell me what you really think and not what you think is the Israelite thing to say. You know, what's really going on in your head? You know, don't say, oh no, yes, brother, listen, tell me if I'm full of crap. Brother, you're full of crap, whatever like that. Oh, okay. And now we can move forward and we can figure out, okay, how can I stop being full of crap? You know what I'm saying? Teach me. Well, let me teach you. So that's what I meant by argument. I wasn't saying, hey, you know, let's start up and, you know, get the rolling pins flying in the kitchen or whatever like that, but more so provoking each other to come out of the comfort zone and talk about things that we normally wouldn't speak about, you know, when we're in our comfort zone. So I just wanted to clarify. I didn't want to make it seem like let's go around and just start arguments all day. That's now definitely what I'm not saying. So.
I'm sorry, I'm pressing buttons. Okay, real quick, I wanted to, Shamika is here and so is Kaim. Shamika, if you want to say something, you go ahead, and then after that, Kaim, if you want to get on and say something, that's good.
Okay. Remind me of the question again, because I've been rehearsing my answer, and I want to make
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Oh, yeah, so the question we on now is, when courting, what questions must you ask before advancing to the next stage? So we're talking about, you know, if you're married, what would you tell your former self, or what would you wish you would have known before you enter into marriage about how emotional trauma can impact the relationship, or how to deal with it?
So this might change the dynamic a tiny bit, but before, because I didn't, you know, we know about dating and stuff like that, but the way the world view dating is how I entered into my relationship. So I wish I would have known about courting beforehand. But even before that, I wish I had that person who knew me and told me, like, maybe you should do this before you start pursuing anybody. I wish I had a sound person who was able to know that I was dealing with stuff, and they gave me the confidence to put myself in a position to work on myself before I entered into anything. Because I know my triggers too, and all of those things are relationship based. And it's not based like from a guy to guy type thing. It's like from the people who's supposed to care, like your parents and stuff like that. So a lot of my triggers are from there, and it's so easy for a man to bring all that sadness back to the surface unknowingly. Like, so I wish I would have dealt with things, dealt with my hurt, dealt with my pain, dealt with all the things that I knew was wrong with me before I courted, dated, or married anybody. Because now it's harder to deal with those when you're dealing with a person, because they don't really understand. So yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that too. That's good.
Definitely.
Kaim, you want to jump on?
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Shalom, everybody. Yeah, what the sister just said was good. I'm always late because I start my lessons with my house at 12, and I usually go for 2 hours. So I'm just getting on, but I'm trying to tell you, I'll be needing to hear this. Like, this is a good forum. So that's my little disclaimer. But just in retrospect, because you know, all we really have to go on is the lives that we known for ourselves and the lives we've experienced, you know, being children of our parents, and what we've seen and what we've experienced is pretty much all we have to go on. And of course, the Bible. So with that being said, it just appears to me that the pain and suffering and things, I think that's something that we're going to continue to carry from one relationship, and if we leave that one into the next. And Paul said he had a thorn in his side. Now, I look at the Bible from as many angles as I can to make sure I get an understanding so that it'll be able to be applied in my life. So a thorn in his side, we all gonna have that thorn in our side. And I'll attribute that to baggage or something that keeps you remembering that you have some form of hurt, pain, suffering, even goodness, and all of those things. Like, we have to be mindful of that. So when we go into a relationship, people say, don't bring no baggage. Who cannot bring the baggage of their life with them? No, you can't drop that off nowhere. And unfortunately, every person that you deal with, whether you're in a intimate relationship with them or just your brother and or sister, they're going to receive some of your baggage. That's just a product of our transgression as a people, as a whole. So with that being said and known, that's why I believe the commandments that Christ gave when they asked him what was the greatest outside of loving your God with all your heart, is loving your brother as yourself. That is so key in our society today, because we all know that we all have been through pretty much the same type of trauma. Whether we experienced it or seen it, it still affects us. And so we have to really just be mindful in going into any type of relationship we enter in with a person, because the commandment says to love your neighbor as yourself. We can't get rid of that. So I know you have issues, I have issues, and a lot of us need to learn to shut up and listen, and then when to speak, if even it is time for you to speak. Because sometimes people just want to vent. Sometimes they need feedback. And the brother Levi, I think he posted that one time. And I know I'm not going to get this right, but you said something to this effect. Being a moray, you have to know when to speak or listen or to give advice or something, so forth. And that's just a part of being a moray, yes, but being an Israelite, we have to learn these things: when to give and when to receive. Scripture said there's a season for all things, and going through life, you learn when to apply the different seasons. You learn when to do whatever is necessary to uplift your family. And that's just really key today for us all, because love, the real definition of love, is what we need to understand first, because in understanding it, you'll know how to share it, when to share it. Because the truth is, I never met none of y'all face to face, but I can honestly tell you this: I love you. And so if you understand what love is, you got to understand that means I'll get in your butt bone when you ain't acting right. Whether you have seen me and met me, I'm going to do that. But also do unto others as you have to do. So if you don't get on me, then I'm not going to consider you my friend. And that's just me, though. And I know that everybody's not like that, but that is the truth of the matter. You need to get on me, whether I receive it or not, because my life is detrimental to your life. And if you don't correct me, my blood will be on your hands if I was to lose my life. And that's, these are just things I try to incorporate into my life. And I know when you're younger, it's harder to really see these things because we so gung-ho. I got to do this. I'm going to do this, and then the third. But just as you get older, you really begin to see things for what they are, and you know how precious life really is, and you understand that sharing is a must. Sharing meaning fussing at you, congratulating you, praising you, telling you need to chill. All that is sharing. So please accept my share, but just as freely as I give, please know that give it back to me. And again, I've learned I'm a pretty I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you tell me I'm wrong, bring your facts. Show me I'm wrong, because you telling me ain't gonna suffice for me. I need to be able to see it so I can go reconstruct and then rebuild and then move forward. And I try to teach this to my house first. I even my children, I tell you, if I'm doing something wrong, tell me. We'll talk about it. But y'all know my mind, and I'm going to combat you, so you better come with your facts. And in that, I'm teaching them to stand firm in what they believe and see, and so forth and so on. So that's how I just deal with our people as a whole. I'm very straightforward. I'm very blunt. I think that's the best way to be. A lot of us try to sugarcoat stuff and or don't know how to give information without seeming like you're trying to belittle somebody or something like that. So that's just the practice that I give. So I guess I'm saying I'm that person that how you give it is how I'm gonna give it back to you. So I hope I touched on all that. But as far as relationship go, you will never know nobody's whole story. It takes a lifetime to prove a friend. And even in that lifetime, that friend can still trick you. So faith in the Most High and what he's telling you, because you never know what he'll allow you to be a part of for his purpose. And I think that's really key too. Whatever we're doing, it should be for his purpose. So we're going to get something out of it if it's for his purpose, but also so is the other individual. And that way, in parting ways, if that ends up happening, there should be no hard feelings between you and that person, because both of y'all's focus is his purpose. So all praises, y'all. Thank y'all again for having me. And I just wanted to come in and throw that in there real quick. And I'm glad I caught you.
No, that's good word. Appreciate that. Isaiah or Shema, if you wanted to jump in. And everybody's welcome to stay on. Just mute your mic so there won't be no background noise.
Is it my turn now, or is Shema gonna go? Because I know he hopped out and hopped back in. So okay. Repeat the question one more again, just so I can have full understanding.
It says when courting, what questions must you ask before advancing to the next stage? So I kind of rephrase it to say, if you got married, and what would you wish you would have known or told you, or wish you would have known before you enter into it, especially when it comes to addressing and dealing with emotional trauma.
Okay. I'm gonna try to be quick. That's a compounded question with a large different pathways of answers. So I'm gonna try to keep it as short. What would I have wanted to know before entering in to a situation? Excuse me. Shamika kind of hit it profoundly too, in my opinion. Being able to kind of understand yourself more, know what your triggers are so you can address it. And as the brother said, you never fully drop your baggage off somewhere before you enter into something. So being able to, and that's all manners of relationships. I like to give answers that kind of fit each aspect of life, because it's forever going and they always change. So being able to understand what that baggage is, how it affects you, you can better articulate and communicate that to whoever you're dealing with. So I would have liked to kind of know some of those things instead of even being blindsided to self. So knowing yourself a little better would be that. And you said the second half was as far as marriage, what would you do different? How was that second part?
Well, I had said, so, okay, I'm gonna read the question again. So the question says, when courting, what questions must you ask before advancing to the next stage? And I was saying, but if you're not courting and you're married, like, what would you wish you would have known, or would you tell somebody who is courting?
Okay, got you. So as far as questions to ask, as the sister said, she likes to be very bold and blunt with her truth and kind of lay everything on the table. So that's the question I would like to ask. What is your truth? What do you have to put out there? What are your partner's triggers? So ask those type of questions. What are your triggers? What is your truth? If you're married to somebody already, you done been with them for a good enough time to have a general idea. So asking that question, how do I trigger you, or what are the things that I do to cause these issues to kind of bubble up. And what do you feel you need to handle? When it comes to trauma, a lot of times we don't necessarily think objectively enough to say what do we need to get help. And sometimes just the asking of that question can put yourself in a space to say, well, hell, what do I need? Or what would make this relationship better? Or what about me can I not necessarily change but improve on? You know, so asking those questions to yourself and to someone else, and listening to the answer. Because a lot of times we listen, or we think we listen. Like, I remember sitting talking to someone and say, hey, I'm a great listener, phenomenal listener, you know. And as you get older, you kind of realize maybe in some of those situations, but not in all of them, you know. So as the brother even said, you know, that whole thing about the greater commandments, and the latter part of that being, you know, loving your neighbor as yourself. You can look at that as in multiple ways, but sometimes you gotta kind of change that and kind of look at it in a sense of understanding how you feel and how you want to be treated, and then repeating that and giving that back. Like how he said, you know, how he gets it is how he dishes it out. I want to tell her that just a little bit to speak on positive senses, because a lot of times people use that in a negative connotation. Well, if you treat me this way, I'm going to do that to you, and that gets us nowhere. So kind of changing that narrative, and as Tamar said, you know, increasing the love when people are matching you with resentment, are matching you in the status of negativity. So sometimes it's coming at them differently. So to keep it short, I would kind of culminate all of that into things that I wish I've known, I wish I would have known, or asked to kind of get out there and to see what responses I get, you know, especially focusing on the listening thing, because a lot of times you're listening, but you don't necessarily hear what the person is saying. A lot of times the person may communicate something without actually saying it. It's kind of that whole read between the lines, and a lot of times we like to say, well, I ain't no mind reader or nothing like that. But if this is your other half, your wife, husband, etc., it would kind of behoove you to take a little time to kind of understand how they think, and use a little wise discernment when looking at traumatic situations or situations period, because you don't know, or you might know, or with those questions being answered, you can see how that can trigger them. So you can learn how to either steer away, help build, improve. So that's maybe, instead of a big suitcase of a bag, it might become a little pocketbook of a bag moving forward, which will make it a little easier for yourself as well as others to deal with. So I know Shamar probably gonna make jokes about me still being long-winded, but I'm gonna end it there.
What's the question? Was it more so for you as an individual, or was it more so for the person you're courting?
Okay. I'm gonna say the question again. Okay. It says
Yeah, I
when
took it as
courting.
an individual.
No,
Yeah.
okay. It said when courting, what questions must you ask before advancing to the next stage? So if you're not, I guess having listened to the conversation, maybe for those who might be listening, if they're courting and they don't want to be on a oops, I messed up. What would you what questions would you what?
A
Oh,
closed mouth don't get fed. So ask
you
all
ask,
questions.
huh?
A
I'm
closed
sorry, go
mouth
ahead.
don't get a closed mouth don't get fed is what they say, right? So you won't eat, you won't get You won't consume in what you need. You won't get the right nutrients. You won't get all these things to thrive, your body to thrive. You know, man and woman supposed to be one, right? One body. So closed mouth don't get fed. Ask all questions you want. That's it. Most relationships that fail is because of lack of questions. So in a courtship, ask, ask, ask. Take note, ask. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And so again, thanks to everybody that's watching. We encourage you to share the video because the conversation, like we kind of thick on here today, which is a good thing. So just imagine how many other people may want to hear or join in or whatnot. So just feel free to share the video, and then I know that hopefully the conversation will continue after we press end on the meeting. So the last question is, which strategies are useful in saving marriages when unresolved emotional trauma leads to this is a long question, I'm sorry. Which strategies are useful in saving marriages when unresolved emotional trauma leads to conversations around divorce? So y'all beefing in the household. This is the Negro version. Y'all beefing in the household, y'all can't get no peace. You like, get out my face. What would you say to them to stop them from getting divorced? So now we're trying to save this stuff. What y'all got?
Yeah, that's a lot. That's that's a lot. And of course, and anybody who knows me knows that I have a particular understanding of marriage resolutions and things. I'm not a I'm not a divorce for any reason kind of a person, but at the same time I understand that divorce is what the Most High gave us as an exit clause, you know what I'm saying, the exit clause for something that is unable to be resolved. If there is if there's nothing, if it cannot be resolved, and again, that has a lot to do with a person's commitment. You know, if you're committed to a marriage, if you're committed to a relationship, then obviously you're going to put and do everything possible, everything humanly possible to rectify a situation. But of course, not all situations are rectifiable. And this is the reason why we were given the law of divorce, that if it cannot be reconciled, then, let's not waste each other's time. Let's not defile the covenant further by by coming at each other and calling each other names and I hate you and you hate me and I break your jaw and you break my jaw, or whatever the case may be. I mean, at that point, the covenant has already been defiled. So why go any further with it? So I mean, again, I have a particular understanding with that. But for those who want to, for those who feel that it is necessary to preserve a marriage, if a marriage is preservable, one of the things that I think that is missing in these, not in our conversations, but in like Sister Tamar said, in the Negro conversation about marriage and relationships is, and I think Sister Noya spoke about it briefly as well, and that is empathy. One of the things, that we kind of overlook is that, sometimes the issue might not really be about you. And we oftentimes, we like to put it on ourselves and be like, oh, it's me, the Daffy Duck syndrome, me, I, or whatever like that. Sometimes, no, the issue might just be something that she's going through or that he's going through, and there has to be an understanding. And we have to come to a point where it's like, you know what? Though that's a valid, what she's saying is a completely valid point, or what he's saying is completely valid. And so they have, so when you have empathy, you understand not only what they're saying, but why they're saying it, where they're coming from with what they're saying, because you already understand their background. You understand the trauma that preceded these disagreements in the marriage. As far as what can be said to to, I guess, deter divorce or to keep the marriage going, that's a very very slippery area as well, because all marriages don't have the same triggers. And some people, like for instance, we talk about infidelity in one show. Some marriages can survive infidelity. Some marriages if you even see me looking at a woman, the marriage is already on the rocks. So you know what I'm saying? It really depends on the on the type of marriage or the you know what I'm saying, the integrity of that couple. You know, as far as what can preserve that relationship or what can preserve that. It has a lot to do with also with patience. Like me, I'm a very patient person, so therefore certain things, well, as long as it's not infidelity, certain things we can work that out, we can get past, and or whatever the case may be. But one of the things that has to be present is that there has to be ground rules, and Shema laid this out in one of the very first episodes that we had on love language. There has to be ground rules instituted. What is our foundation? Is the Most High our foundation? Like, is that, like, what is it that we have that when all else fails, what do we come back to? Because we may not see eye to eye on finances. We may not see eye to eye on issues with family, the in-laws, whatever. We may not see eye to eye on a bunch of things. But what is that point where we all can come back to and say, okay, to hell with this, to hell with that. What do we come back to? What is our center? And if the Most High is the center, then yeah, but then all praise to the Most High. We can move forward and say, okay, let's get back to this center, and one by one, let's pick off these issues that are troubling us. Let's hit these scriptures. Let's get in the book and figure and pick these things off one by one. Okay, yeah, let's handle that. That's handled. Move it to the side. Move on to the next issue. But a lot of times, again, being that you said, Sister Tamar, you said about these Negro type relationships. Most of these relationships don't have that center. They don't have that point, that common denominator that when all else fails, we can come back to this, because these things weren't established in the very beginning of the relationship during the courting period. So when the marriage starts going downhill, there's nowhere else it can go except downhill, because there's nothing else to hold it together. Again, it goes right back to the story of the three little pigs. If your marriage is built on straw, then it doesn't matter how nice the house looks. All it takes is a small wind to destroy it, and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing that holds it together. Whereas the house made of brick and mortar and cement, these things are now solid because you have that foundation. So again, some of the things that we're talking about is Hebraic in nature, but going back to your point, the Negro type of marriage, if you don't have that center, that common denominator centerpiece to get back to, then it may not be anything to there may be nothing there to preserve. You may have to let it die. Again, that's the Negro marriage. Hebrews, we have a different vantage point when it comes to dealing with these issues. But again, we also have to remember that many of us, although we have fringes and tassels and turbans and head wraps, some of us are still Negro in our orientation, and we just simply came into the truth, wrapped a turban around it, and we're good. But many of us still have, those Negro tendencies. I know I did in my younger years. I was a nigga with a turban. So, no, I'm just being honest or whatever like that. But yeah, so again, it's a slippery slope. But I think that empathy, when everything boils down to it, empathy and finding that centerpiece, that common denominator, that's what can begin the process of helping to save or restore a rocky relationship.
And I want to just jump in because I wanted to get, I know we kind of wound all this last time, but just trying to get everybody's voices in, so y'all bear with me. Noya, if you want to say something, and then Shamika, and then we can go back. And then Noya, Shamika, Kaim, then we can go back, Isaiah, and Shema, if that's okay with everybody. I just want to make sure everybody's voice is heard.
Okay, I'm on. Okay, I want to hit this question from 3 areas. First and foremost, as I said before, it's important, even when you're beefing, to understand that you have a shared identity. It cannot be just about you. It cannot be just about him. Swirling in 2 different spheres of existence is detrimental to a long-term relationship. Now, that sorry, that just won't work, especially when conflict arises. You have to understand, and if you haven't developed that idea of the shared identity, you won't be and won't operate as a united front, detrimental to a relationship. Next thing, remember, it's not about always being right. It's about also being happy and understanding that this person that you're with at one point made you happy. And so you need to figure out how to. Now, I'm speaking, based on my discipline. I teach psychology. Psychologically, people that we like to be around people that make us feel good, because we are sensual beings. We do operate, I don't care if you Hebraic, nigga, I don't care what I said the N word, I'm sorry, but Negro, Black people in general are sensual beings, and we do operate in the realm of our senses. And so we tend to avoid those things that make us feel bad and gravitate toward those things that make us feel good. At one point, remember what made you feel good about your mate. And remember the things you did that made your mate feel good and make them want to be around you. Go back and remember. Sometimes you just got to squash some stuff. Some stuff you just need to be the bigger person and squash it. Because one, you've developed this. Do you want to kill the we or the us that you've developed? You decide. Because if you want to hold on to being right and me, and let me address this one statement that Chief Zeb said. He said that marriages can survive infidelity. In the statistics, in the information I know, personal and anecdotal, relationships can survive infidelity by the man more so than infidelity by the woman, because y'all brothers ain't having it. Y'all ain't even think about that. I know I'm telling the truth. Anyway, I'm just saying, if you're in a marriage and you're beefing,
What was
you heard me. You heard me. You heard me. You know, I ain't lying. Men don't even want to think about the idea that their woman has been with another man. But a woman will take a man back quicker than a man will take a woman back who's been with another man. It's the truth. Think about going in the recess.
I hear no lies. I hear no lies, girl.
Oh no, I'm not saying. I'm not questioning the truthfulness of it. It's just interesting to hear it vocalized, especially from a woman. So it's
the truth.
I'm questioning that.
You can question it all you want to, my brother, but the truth is the light.
The truth is in the
is we're not talking absolutes. We're talking statistics.
Yeah, that's not absolute, because I took back 2 of them. So
exactly, right?
No. I didn't say all. I said marriages are more likely to survive infidelity by the man more so than the woman. I didn't say absolutes. But if you run the numbers, the women got y'all beat when it comes to forgiveness, when it comes to infidelity. Y'all.
That is true. I
say what
agree.
You want to say if you want to say it.
I gotta see the numbers all over the world, not just the United States, not just
your two matter. Your two, they matter. Yes, they matter. Yes. Mine, even them back, they matter.
No.
I'm just saying, worldwide, men don't playing it for the most part, and that's just the top.
United States.
Okay, we have people talking over each other, so we can let the sister finish her thoughts, and then at the end we could do a little rap battle.
Last thing I wanted to say was this: don't reach for divorce first. Take it off the table, because you can't say that it can't be resolved if that's your first line of defense. I'm getting out of here. No, work it out. I believe that if you worked yourself you took time to get into a relationship, unless you didn't. But if you took time to get yourself into a long-term relationship, take the time and the patience to work yourself out if out is what you're determined to do. However, when a person is hell-bent on getting out of a situation, they'll wait you out to get out. But when you have the mindset of divorce, which is easier to have when you've come from a family of divorce, when you've seen divorce happen all around you, it's easier for you to say, well, just that's my option. Don't make divorce your first line of defense, because even though, yes, we do have the law of divorce, it is because our hearts are hard. Is why that law had to be instituted. People are hard-hearted. And do you want that to be said of you, that you don't have a heart? You can be malleable to Elohim that you ain't never visually seen, but you can't melt your heart in the presence of someone you said you love. There's a problem there. There's a problem there. I'm hushing.
Hey now, I heard that. That was good. Shamika, if you wanted to jump in, and then Kaim, if y'all still there.
She said everything. Chief said everything. So I'm just gonna. I agree.
Is
Oh,
that
there
my
you go.
green? Oh,
Okay, there you go.
that's my green light. Okay. Yes, you guys really did touch on a lot of stuff. And shoot, I'm just gonna speak from my two experiences of marriage. First one not being in the truth, and I actually am one of those guys that took his wife back, that stepped out on him. And I don't want to seem like Mr. Good Guy, because I was doing it too. But that was my understanding. I know I've done it, and I have been suspecting her of doing it, but she actually came to me and said she was tired of being in a relationship and she wanted out. So she left, but I didn't let her take the children because I wasn't wanting to break up what we had. So she left and got with the guy, and it didn't work out for her well. So she ended up in jail for some things that had happened between her and the gentleman, and I took her back. And she ended up leaving me again like 3 months later, but water under the bridge. So now, in having this knowledge of who I am and the covenant that is actually made between a man and a woman, I have stepped into that realm again, and I had the baggage. So I've wanted to leave numerous times, because I don't like to argue, and because the argument is not bad. Argument is argument, but a shouting match is a whole nother territory. And so I don't like to do the shouting match thing. So it's turned into that quite often. And I don't like that. So I've wanted to leave. I don't want to get pushed out of my character into doing something foolish, because I entered a covenant, but even moreover, I love the woman that I married, point blank, period. And we have a lot of disagreements on scripture, like, for example, the second wife thing. And these are things that we didn't talk about coming into it, because coming into this, it was heard of by me, but not in the forefront of my mind. But circumstances change, things change. Well, not necessarily change, but desires. I don't know how much I can say on here, but without divulging my entire life situation, but some things have come up, and the topic came up, and she's not in agreement with it. So with that, I'm not about to just go say, I don't give a damn what you want, woman. I'm finna go get me a second wife, because that's foolish. So I'm trying to rule my house with knowledge and understanding and compassion and things of that nature. So I just think that uh, the sister was saying that something to the effect of, we have two different ideals, or two different ways of thinking and things of that nature. That is true. Now, this is a thing that I see in our community, in our brothers and sisters that are married, that cause our relationship to fail. Call me old school, call me whatever, but the final decision is that man's. And unfortunately, a lot of sisters don't want to receive that. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm about to just go get me a second wife, but I mean just in every decision revolving around that home, the final decision is the man's. So if he thinks that and prayerfully, we all have not we all, because I don't have a man, but I'm saying you sisters that are married and or courting, that you are dealing with a man that's showing himself to be responsible, a thinking man, and a man that listens to what you have to say, because ultimately, both of you want each other to be comfortable in the house that you're calling your home. So you have to listen to what each other is saying. That's a partnership. The scripture says, can two walk together lest they be agreed? Now, we know that the Most High was talking about his children, but we can apply that, because can you get with a woman and y'all don't agree? No, it just won't work. So we have to take all these things into thought and just realize that that's what it takes. I want to hear her out. If she's somebody whose opinion I don't value, why do I want to be with you? Period. And then to me, getting in relationships is just that simple. Why are you even dealing with somebody that you think is a bonehead? Like, seriously though, it's really that simple. And everything else, I believe, if you love each other, it will work itself out. I believe that. And I don't want to sound cliche, but I do really believe that. If I love you, first of all, I'm going to value what you have to say, because your opinion plus my opinion equals the elevation of our home. And that's what we have to make sure that our works are geared toward: the elevation of our home, giving our children a safe environment. Because when everybody walks out the door, now it's the world against us. So we have to know that I can come home, and even if we're in the midst of an argument, this man is going to hear me out, or this woman is still going to hear me out, even though she's mad at me. Did I freeze? Can y'all still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but you are opposing.
Oh, yeah, I froze. And I don't even like how I look right there. That's not a
keep
good
talking
look.
though. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, it does look off the chain a lot.
Yeah. I agree. Oh man. Don't y'all screenshot that, please. But so I think that's just the dynamic. You enter into a covenant with somebody that you respect, that you love, that you will honor and cherish, and whose ideals you'll value, because it should equal the upliftment and growth and rise of your home. And that, to me, is what it boils down to, as far as whatever it is that you're thinking about. So yeah, y'all made some really good points, man. And shoot, none of us should have bad marriages just listening to this advice. This should all flow smoothly. All praises, y'all. That's all I got to say.
That's good. So Isaiah and Shema, if y'all wanted to add y'all thoughts to this, and then we'll get ready to close out after that.
All good points. All realistic. So that's also great. It's just a matter of how you look at it. To stop divorce, coming from a situation where in my family, broken homes is kind of like a cliche. Moms and pops didn't stay together. My grandmother and my grandfather didn't stay together. My grandmother and her second husband didn't stay together. So repeating that narrative is easy. Divorce is an easy way out, as the sister and the brother and everybody else before me kind of said. We all alluding to the same point, so that makes it easy. It's easy to do that. It's easy to kind of slide out or to say, hey, I can't deal with this no more, so let me hop on the next meal ticket, or as they used to say, the midnight train to Georgia. No, nobody laughed. Okay, but the point that I want to make is more so find the listening ear first. Everybody has talked about empathy and compassion, and that's definitely needed. But the ideal to understand that you're an individual, you have your own thoughts, ideals, and conclusions, but being able to not only listen to the other person's, but find a way where you can reach a common ground, or even if it's a meeting, or to say, okay, I will relinquish this much or sacrifice this for the greater good. I think sometimes that has to come in on both sides. It's not a one person thing. I think a lot of times in relationships and marriages, we kind of make it a one person thing. And that begins to pressure the other person to want to leave you even more. So kind of gritting it out and fighting it out and sticking tough, the sister made a very interesting point. You know, we're saying we can't be compassionate and show empathy to the person that we say we love and want to spend the rest of our lives with. A lot of times we make those notions off of emotional based situations, but as the sister said, you know, tap into what that emotion was and look at that concrete element behind it. Find what that is and focus on a way to get back. Sometimes it takes, hey, let me focus or have a different opinion, or I'll even look at something in a different mindset. So eventually, with the compassion first talking about those issues, you can find a better solution. Something that's more so not oriented to one person, but expresses what that person feels, but allows both to kind of grasp and get a better advancement. The brother said something excellent. Cayenne, I don't want to pronounce your name wrong, but you said, I wish you could just come on and say it again. You might be froze or away, but you said something to the similitude of the communication aspect is what makes the relationship grow. And that's the way I interpreted what you said. And I think that's definitely necessary. A lot of times we enter into these things and we forget how important dialogue is, or even an expressed one where you're not diluting your truth. So it's okay to look at yourself as an individual, or even be selfish to a degree, but selfish in the aspect of getting your opinion out there or put on the table, and not selfish to what the conclusion of the matter is. So I think tips like that are useful to removing yourself from divorce or dealing with any type of traumatic situation, on whatever level it is. And I'm going to kind of make this my closing remarks as well, just to save on time and allow everybody else to have at it. But, you know, find out what the nature of the situation is, determine if y'all can work on that together, or if y'all have to use outside resources. Therapy has always been a phenomenal thing. It's just a matter of picking the right type of therapist and the person that can relate. And once you're able to do that as a family or a community, go ahead and operate through that and see it all the way through before you say, hey, I want to give up. As we know, marriage is a lifelong thing. Divorce, you know, even what the sister said about infidelity, the thing that we missing, even though I know we were kind of joking, the thing that was missing was the level of forgiveness. And she even touched on that, saying women are more forgiving, or have been, as far as statistics show in that situation. Remembering forgiveness, remembering that we're human and we make mistakes, remembering what that basis is, which I think we talked about a number of times, having a central point, or even if you have a contract, making that contract between you to a central point. And even when you feel as though you got away from it, taking that energy to go back and revisit or even tweak it, or to say, hey, for now, this is the way we have to move until we're able to get back there. So it's not necessarily something that happens overnight, but it takes time. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there and say shalom and peace to everyone.
Shema, if you wanted to jump. Yeah. There you go.
There was a lot of stuff said, man. I know I don't got time to touch on it. I think it's the difference between forgiving and forget. And I don't think that just because somebody takes you back, they forgave you. That's evident within the whole process when you get back together and how the person is being treated who is claimed to have been, forgiven. So that's a whole nother topic. Same with the stats. We got people that lie within their stats. There's different levels of cheating. So say somebody, if they was talking on the phone with somebody, that's cheating. Or sexual intercourse is cheating. It's like so many factors. Y'all know I'm a variable guy, so don't get me started. But as far as yeah, it's a lot. It's just so much more to that. The strategies. I'm not knocking what was said. It's facts. What she said as well. I just wanted to add to that. Strategies. The one thing I would say is to be, if you're a unit, stay a unit. Keep everybody outside of it. A lot of times when you got trauma, unless you're dealing with somebody who is like if you're seeking help, something like that. Unless you're dealing with somebody like that, a lot of times those that have like dealing with a certain type of trauma, depending on what it is, and it's not a close family member who was there with you to help you through it, and it's just like friends. Friends is kind of shaky on what a friend is. I say leave outside sources out because some friends don't know how to separate your trauma with the person that you're with, your new man or your new woman. And now it's messing up y'all dynamic as a unit. And a lot of times friends are not like psychologists. Friends are not people who know how to be objective. And by them not being objective and they being subjective to your emotion and not understanding, well, my girl or my man is just really emotional right now. Let me just listen to them, but don't add on to their emotion, because once you add on to their emotion, now it's really tainting the relationship between a man and a woman. And people could disagree, but trust. We are very influential people. So my strategy is keep outside influences out, unless it's a professional person that helps this type of situation. And you all try to keep one side first, prayerful. I just try to tread lightly on whatever this trauma might be, but keep people out of it, please, because it does nothing but hurts it more. It feeds the fire that's already been within this woman or this man. And this new man or this new woman that's coming into it now, they getting a freaking a volcano eruption on them. You know what I'm saying? And now they got to sit up there and not only try to figure out how to help this woman or this man that they're with, but now diffuse the other igniters in the situation, which is the outside sources. That's my thoughts. Call it an opinion, call it a fact, whatever. I just say think about it, because outside sources, I put that in my book, A Manual Self-Preservation, Divine Conscience, and it's going to be Men versus Women War II. But that causes a lot of destruction. Always got to plug a little bit. Check out, Moray book too. Just put out. But anyway, that destroys a lot of relationships, even those that follow Torah, because we got a lot of leaders, Morays or Moraz or Moraine, that themselves, did I say that right, are not really equipped in that specific subject. They might be cold on the knowledge, but they might not be fully equipped on how to help your marriage. And that's it. Stay a unit. Just y'all two. Uh-oh. I think she left. So with that being said, we're gonna go. Oh, she joined back. Are you back? There you go.
Oh my good, the thing. How dare you, Zoom? Okay. Can y'all hear me? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, I'm sorry, that was weird. I was saying that I agree with what Shamal was saying. Definitely, don't run telling everybody your business. You know what I'm saying? But there's definitely some people out there. There's some good people that I know that I can lead you to. Hint, hint. As far as like counseling, but for real, I think that just to wrap it up, definitely, I think I'm gonna go back to what Zebulon said, because I feel like if you are a person, and I can only speak from a air quote Hebrew perspective, because I'm saying air quote because I don't want anybody to say you ain't really a Hebrew, but just for the sake of a conversation, if you operating in Torah, you have a foundation. There's no excuse. There's no excuse on how not to deal with any of the things that we talk about, I believe, on this platform. I think even because I'm not against divorce either. I feel like if your husband and your wife is kicking your butt or abusing the kids, I can't see how the Most High is like, no, stay in it. So we have extreme examples of things, and we can read it in the book, so it's in there. But I feel like if you're in a situation and you're saying to your partner, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, and they're like, oh well, we'll find a way to deal with it, but they're not trying to go back to the Torah. Y'all not, it's my opinion, y'all not equally yoked. It's not an equal, because there's no foundation to even go back to. And a lot of people, I think, are idealistically, I think Zebulon said it before, you say idealistically, but the translated was would actually implement what we read, maybe because we don't believe in it. We don't really think that it say what it say, or that we should do what it say. But I think that if you are in a marriage and you're on the same page and you have a contract, and your contract says if something is wrong, and that is that ain't gonna prosper, because now you're building on another foundation, one that is not gonna do nothing but fall apart. So that's just all I want to say on this topic. But again, we thank everybody that joined us. It's so good to see everybody's face, and definitely keep the conversation going. If you want to share the video, please do. We'll be putting it up on YouTube as well, hopefully spreading the information or conversation, sharing the conversation even wider. Like that page, it's just Love Language Roundtable on YouTube. And follow this page too. If you are on Love Language, like the page, but also follow so you can get all the updates. And we welcome all of y'all's voices as we try to collectively heal the Black family. It ain't one person's job to do. It's the community of people that love us, that should love each other, to help us to get it together. So that's all I wanted to say. Grace, peace to everybody. We love you. And until next time, shalom, shalom.
Shalom.